Hey girls, happy November. Elise here. I am ready to walk you through your lesson for this month, the PDF for everything, show you a couple examples, hopefully get you all underway so that you can work on everything and we can talk to you in about a week and a half for the first one. So because this is a short month, because we're not sending this out till the first Friday the 6th, and our first virtual session will be Tuesday the 17th, we have just a few new things to talk about, a few new tricks, a few new elements in HTML, and then a challenge related to CSS for anybody that wants to go above and beyond. So I'll walk through each of these 3 new things and you can decide how much of them you want to include, each of them you want to include in your projects. My recommendation would be to, especially this early, just add these different things to the project you've already started on. But obviously, if you at any point want to start over and work on a pen from scratch, you can go ahead and do that. Just go back and get the PDF for session number 1 and session number 2 and any other sessions to come by the time you decide that, so that you make sure you're starting and you don't forget all the basic stuff like having HTML and body and all of the tags that you need. So the 3 new tricks for this month are videos, always a really, really big hit. Forms, which we start introducing here because next month we'll get to start talking about JavaScript and how we use what someone would enter into form fields to then use JavaScript to do something based on that. Have them enter their name and then have something change on the site based on what they enter when they press the button. That's always exciting. And then the last one is everyone's other favorite, aside from videos, emojis, which everyone is familiar with from a phone or a tablet or drawing them. But adding them to your website, we want to make sure we have a full process in place to do it. So we'll talk about that, and I'll show you a gigantic list that you can use to go and add as many as you would like to your site. So we'll start first with videos. Last month we talked about images. Images are great, especially since you also can use GIFs, so you can use a little bit of movement in there kind of for free with an image tag. But obviously videos are a much bigger attraction to keep someone paying attention to your site for a long time. And who doesn't like laughing at funny dog or cat videos right there on whatever you're doing? So in order to add a YouTube video, we actually embed it in the site, and we do that using a different kind of element called an iframe as opposed to an image tag like we used last time. So an iframe is basically just the ability to have sort of a site within your site. You can sometimes just put a whole bunch of new code in there or anything like that, a complete standalone page. But in this case, what we do is we create it, and inside of it, we just put an embedded YouTube video. And so that way it shows up right in line. We can click play. We don't have to go out to a link to YouTube, and we can watch the video. The only tricky thing about this is that YouTube makes it just hard enough to be annoying, of course. So when you have picked a YouTube video that you want to add, this is a very important note right here. And if you're struggling with the video, once you go to try it, come back and read this carefully because this will probably answer the question. So if you've picked the YouTube video you want to add, for example, here is a very absurd compilation of dogs dancing to music. It's great. So I have this. I've decided this is what I want to use. Up here in our URL bar, you can see we have youtube.com/watch V equals, and then a whole bunch of gibberish. This gibberish is an ID for this specific video. If I clicked on a different video, it would have a different ID. The reason that's important is you'll see up here in the example, you'll also recognize the youtube.com/, but in this case, we have the word embed, then a slash, and then that exact same ID that you had before. So what you want to do is when you go and you search for the video and you pick it, if you already have this typed into your HTML, which as we said last time, I would recommend just typing in what's here in purple because you know that that works. Once you have it working, you can go in and modify everything about it. You could change the width and the height of your video to make it gigantic or super tiny, whatever you'd prefer. But most importantly, You would find everything after the equal sign in the video that you want to use, and you would replace that with, or replace what's here after the slash embed slash with that same thing, so that instead of embedding my video, it embeds your video. I'll show you real quick over here. You can see that if I scroll this down here, you can see my iframe right there with the width of this, height of this, my source. And this puts it right here into this. I can click and you can see it get started and do something very, very silly. You also can see that if I, for example, change the width, and it made it just a little bit wider. It's actually a little bit hard to see, but I promise it did do something. So that's videos. They're very straightforward. Honestly, the hardest part of videos is going out and finding the video or videos you want to include. So it's also the most fun. So all things considered, it's not really the worst part. The next one is forms. So forms are a big part of websites. You could have something that just has someone log in. You could have something that requires someone to fill out a bunch of information about where they live to place an order for something. You could have all sorts of things, surveys and things for school. I'm sure you're all very, very used to seeing. The two basic elements we're going to start with today are text boxes and buttons, because you got to have a place for someone to enter some text, answer a question, and you got to have a button for them to click on to say they've answered it. That's the basics. If you have that, you can go pretty far. There are other form elements, all kinds of different things that we will also talk about because they all have their own place based on what you're trying to do. But for this one, all of our form elements, the biggest thing, most important thing is form elements always have to be inside of these, remember our nested structure of HTML. So we need to have a starting form and an ending form, much like we had a list where we had to have, jump back over here, where we had to have, we just say we're starting our list, we're ending our list, and here's all the stuff in between. It's going to work the same with this. We're starting our form, we're ending our form, and here's all the stuff in between. So that's important. You can see right here, I have my form and all of the text for it. And if I scroll all the way down, you can see, can you tell me a little about yourself? Is the paragraph intro that I created. Then I have a text box for where the person's name and a text box for their favorite animal. Then I have a button that you can click that currently does absolutely nothing. But this element right here is what next month we'll be modifying to have something happen when you click it. And then whatever anyone entered in either of these, we'll be filling out this JS area to make something happen. So we can look forward to that, but in the meantime, it's important that we get the basics down here so that our form structure is in place, because if that's not in place, then we end up with a bigger problem with JavaScript understanding. So that's forms. And then lastly, we have emojis. So I'm certain everyone has at least some general basis, maybe in a lot of ways, many points of example on using emojis. I think they're fun because I think they're a neat way to understand, a neat way to add interesting things to your site, as well as a neat way to understand character encoding, which is a whole large thing. But basically it is that when we want a browser to understand something, there's all different languages and ways it can interpret to understand. And one of them is something like encoded characters. So in this case, similar to with CSS, when we have the pound sign or the hashtag, and then we have a set of numbers and letters after it to make a color, this is kind of similar. All of these in the middle here, in between the ampersand, the pound, and the semicolon, are entity characters that relate to a specific emoji. So in this case, I created HTML that looks like this, and people would see a paragraph with that text in it. So a lion, a tiger, a bear, oh my. And the way that you can see that manifesting here, where I have a gigantic number of emojis that describe how happy I look when girls are programming. I picked a rainbow and a star and a Christmas tree, because who doesn't love Christmas? And a party confetti and a Ferris wheel, because it's like a roller coaster and a super fun ride for everybody. And a trophy, because you're all awesome. And a crown, because you're all queens. And hearts, because I'm excited to know you. And a explosion of knowledge and a big smile, and a cat with hard eyes, because why not? So that's just an emotional, you know, roller coaster of fun there. So you can create all of that. I'll go back in here. You can see I have this whole paragraph tag that just has this and this and this, and they all look the same, except for, in this case, these 6 numbers in the middle of every one. And you can see over here, I have this list of emojis and their entity characters, which is this gigantic page of approximately a bajillion, just a rough estimate, of what the emoji will look like. And then this one, this column right here, is the one you have to be concerned about. It is the one that will give you what you need to put into here. So if I don't remember how far down the line was, but there we go. So you see I scrolled down till I found the lion, and then I copied what was here in this first column, and then I inserted that after my ampersand and pound and before my semicolon, and it turned into a lion. And then the same with these. I found the one for the rainbow, I found the one for the star, and I found the one for the Christmas tree, and so on and so forth. So those are the 3 new things that we're talking about learning that you can include. And then down here, this is literally just a breakdown of all of the code that's in this example that I keep citing. So anything that's not in bold and is in black is stuff that we had last time. So I wanted to make it clear that you can't just copy what's right here, stick it in a blank pen and have that be fine. We want to make sure that you have your HTML parent tags and your body parent opening and closing tags, and then anything else you have ahead of it before you start getting into all of this stuff. So purple code represents new code that we'd be adding for these 3 types of things. If you wanted to copy all of this or type all of this rather, copy it verbatim and bring it over into your project, and then go in and look for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 new emojis that you are excited about, or anything else. You also could change the questions that are being asked here. Make sure you also then change the placeholder to reflect what you're asking so that it's clear. And you would also want to change the ID to be something that describes the question. That'll make a lot more sense next month when we talk about JavaScript. Right now, these just are kind of superfluous, but we need them in there so that we know we can refer back to each of these elements later. And the other thing is styling the new things. So here we're adding the new things, here we're styling them. So for the iframe, you use it just like you can style it in CSS the same way you can style a paragraph tag or an H1 or anything else. In this case, I wanted to put a little bit more of a margin over top of my video, a little bit more space. So I included the margin top and gave it a 20 pixel amount, which isn't large, but just enough, kind of like one free line of text. And then I chose a font size for my text boxes. And this is a little bit tricky syntax, but it's basically saying that the HTML element itself is called input, which ties to right here, the same way as we tie everything else. But then we are saying that I don't want all of my input necessarily to have that, because input could also be checkboxes and things like that. Anything that you'd find in a form is going to be an input element. But our input elements have a type value. In this case, it's text. And down here, the type value is button. So I'm saying only input elements that have a type of text. I want the font size to be 24. You could change this to also have a background color. You could change it so all your text boxes enter pink text, even if nothing else on your page does, anything like that. You can style these, as always, the same way you style anything else in CSS. And then the same is true here for it's an input element, same way, but the type equals button, And in this case, I'm actually saying I do want it to have the same font size, but I want white text and a black background. So if I scroll down here, I can see that I have white text on a black background. You also can see that both the text boxes and the button all have a larger font than maybe our paragraph does, which would make sense because we told it that we wanted it to have a 24 for both. So that's what we have for all of those. I'm going to move past those now into the challenge section. So this is, I'm going to give a really brief overview of it here, and then I'm actually going to have a second video that explains it in more detail, just so that this recording isn't too long for anybody who's just looking for the main parts. Basically, what the challenge allows you to do is style elements using two different types of attributes, classes and IDs, that you can set if you had paragraph tags and you didn't want all of them to look the same. You wanted some of them to have black text and some of them to have green text and some of them to have purple text. Then you could have classes of paragraph tags, one called green, one called black, and one called purple. And then you would set attributes or set the styles on each of them and then declare them as part of your HTML, so the HTML knew what class it belonged to and could style it accordingly. So I will have a second video linked for that for anyone that wants to go ahead and dive deeper into that. And then last but not least for this primary video is our reference page at the end, which is what do these elements stand for anyway. And again, this is just a reminder that we'll have every month of anything new that's been introduced. So in this case, we have an iframe talking about how that exactly works, how you insert content from another site, embed it, anything to that effect. I do have a link to learn more about it if you're curious, because I always think that helps if you're ever interested in reading more. Form tag, start and finish. This is the parent element. So this is everything that's going to be inside of these are the elements of your form, but we need to have this here so that the site knows that it's to expect to form inside of there. Then you have a text element, input, and you have a button element, input. So in this case, we would use it to trigger an action to submit the form or trigger an action if you clicked the button to do something. And then again, this is going to make a lot more sense next month when we talk about our JavaScript and we figure out how to reference it using our IDs. The last one is not an HTML element, but I think it's a helpful reference. So this is the switch there. This is the ampersand pound semicolon, which would be what you would use if you were putting in an emoji or any other kind of character you can't find on the keyboard. Okay, so that's everything we have in here. I'll go back up to the top and leave it. If you have any questions, as I said in the email, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Yunji. We will be more than happy to help.